On the morning of April 2nd, 2025, Austin Metcalf went to a track meet with his twin brother, Hunter, 4 minutes younger, but Austin always said Hunter was the one he looked up to. They had shared every single day of their lives since the moment they were born. Same birthday, same teams, same bleachers that morning under the same tent, but within the hour, Hunter would be standing close enough to see his brother's eyes in the final seconds. What does that moment do to a person who has never, not for one day, existed without his other half? We're going to come back to that. Here's what most coverage of this case skips entirely. Before anyone was stabbed, before the shove, before the knife came out, Karmelo Anthony reached into his bag and said 4 words. 4 words that are sitting in a police report right now. Almost nobody has heard them, and they tell you everything about how those final seconds actually unfolded. We'll get to those too. And then there's the question everyone online is already asking. After a Collin County jury handed down a 35-year sentence, Austin's father stood up and asked the court for something specific: access to the one piece of evidence that decided this entire case. The court said no, and the reason why is not what you think. 3 threads, 1 tent, 4 seconds that changed everything. Let's go back to the beginning. You're standing under a pop-up tent on a gray Texas morning, rain drums on the canvas above you. Dozens of teenagers in wet warm-up jackets crowd in around you, shoulder to shoulder, waiting for the rain to pass. This is where it happened, and the evidence tells you exactly how. Karmelo Anthony brought a folding knife onto those athletic grounds, concealed, 3.5 inches long. You don't accidentally carry that into a school event. Before anyone touched him, he reached into his bag. He warned the people around him, "Touch me and see what happens." The police report says he told them. Here's where it gets complicated. That warning came before the shove, not after. Which means Anthony already knew what he had. He was already prepared to use it. Now picture the other side of that tent. Witnesses say Austin Metcalf and his teammates asked Anthony to leave. Not once, up to 15 times. 15 chances to walk away. He stayed. Then Metcalf pushed him, a forceful 2-handed shove. Anthony went backward into the metal bleachers. A shove. Not a weapon. What Anthony did next is what the medical examiner had to explain to the jury. The knife went in 2.5 inches. It pierced Metcalf's heart. Collin County District Attorney Greg Willis said it best after sentencing. "A year ago, when this senseless murder unfolded, I said that it had struck a deep nerve in Collin County and far beyond." Now think about the minutes right after. Officers were already on site. They had Anthony in custody within minutes. Body cam footage caught his first words. "He put his hands on me. I told him not to." That's it. That's the whole first account. Here's what's missing from it. No mention of checking on Austin, no call for help. Nothing about the boy bleeding out feet away from him. You'd expect something. There's nothing. So 2 things are still sitting there, unanswered. What happened to that knife in the seconds after? Who actually recovered it, and how? And somewhere, there's footage of those exact 4 seconds. Nobody's described what's actually on it. While Karmelo Anthony was explaining himself to police, telling them what had been done to him, Austin's twin brother Hunter was on the ground, holding his hands, watching his eyes go still. And what happened to Hunter in that moment is something almost no coverage of this case has ever stopped to look at. We'll get to that. But first, here's how the case the jury actually saw came together. Inside the McKinney courtroom, a sketch artist sat capturing the scene in real time. Anthony at the defense table, the jury to his left, the judge to his right, no cameras allowed. This is the room where everything got weighed. Start with the first warning, before any contact at all. Anthony told people not to touch him while reaching into his bag. That's worth noting. Now add the 15 requests to leave. 15 separate moments where he could have stood up and walked. He didn't. That's harder to explain. Then the shove itself, the only physical contact Metcalf made. 2-handed push. The kind that happens at school events every week without anyone dying. That's difficult to dismiss on its own. But here's the number that puts it all in perspective. The jury sat through a week of testimony. Dozens of witnesses. Hours of footage, and they only needed 2.5 hours to decide none of it was self-defense. Now run the math again with that in mind. 15 warnings, 1 push, and in the time it takes a blade to travel 2.5 inches, the entire argument over who belonged under that tent stopped mattering. There's no innocent explanation for that. A Collin County jury agreed. 35 years, 17 and a half before parole is even impossible. By every legal measure, this case is closed. That detail should not matter, but it does, because Austin Metcalf was never just one person in anyone's mind. To his friends, his coaches, his own family, he was one of the twins. And the boy closest to him when it happened wasn't a stranger. It was the other half of that pair. Here's something most people missed about the sentencing phase. The defense called exactly 1 witness. The prosecution called none at all. That 1 witness was Anthony's mother. "He's my oldest, he's my firstborn, he will always be my baby," she told the jury. That was the entire case for mercy. Now, to be fair, there's one thing nobody can fully pin down. Nobody's ever put an exact number on how much time passed between that shove and the stab. Just mesters, just fast moving. That part may never be fully settled, but everything else lines up. The warning, the 15 chances, the push that lasted a second, the knife that came out instead of his feet. For the state of Texas, this case is finished. The law was applied. The verdict was reached. Karmelo Anthony will spend his 20s and early 30s paying for 4 seconds under that tent. There's just one problem with that. The court has admitted on the record this conviction might not survive the appeal, and the reason has almost nothing to do with what happened under that tent. Here's the part almost nobody online has connected. That sealed footage everyone's demanding isn't locked away to hide what Anthony did. There's already a filing in motion that could send this whole case back to a jury. And if that footage gets out first, there may never be a fair one again. Before any of this, before the tent, before the verdict, Austin Metcalf was just a kid who got up early. His mother calls him a morning kid, a hugger, the kind of teenager who made people feel like they mattered just by being around. Hold on to that, because the next part is going to feel very far away from who he was. Somewhere in the basement of the Collin County Courthouse, there's a vault, climate-controlled, locked. Inside it sits the folding knife, and the footage everyone's asking for. Here's why it's still there. On June 10th, the same day the verdict came down, Anthony's legal team filed a notice of appeal. That single filing changes everything. Under Texas law, the court has to keep all trial exhibits sealed while an appeal is active, not to hide guilt, to protect a future jury. If that footage goes viral and the appeal succeeds, finding 12 unbiased jurors in Collin County becomes nearly impossible. So think about what that actually means. Everything from the last chapter, the warnings, the math, the verdict, could, in theory, be argued again in front of 12 different people. And it's worth remembering, in the middle of all this legal maneuvering, Austin was the one in this story who was, by every account, the peacemaker. Now, here's the part that should really sit with you. If the appellate court finds even one procedural error, a single improper instruction to the jury, Anthony could get an entirely new trial, which means the Metcalf family could go through all of this again from the beginning, every witness, every detail, including Hunter. He already sat through one trial testifying about watching his twin die. A retrial means doing that twice. If you want to know the moment this appeal moves, granted, denied, anything, that's exactly what we follow here at Casebreak Network. Breaking cases, following every lead. Subscribe now so you're not finding out from someone else. So right now, nothing about this case is actually finished. Not for the courts, and not for the person who was closest to Austin when it happened. And there's something Hunter Metcalf already said right after it happened. Something that sounded, at the time, like an ordinary thing for a brother to say. But by the time you hear it again in a moment, it won't sound ordinary at all. Right after it happened, Hunter Metcalf said something simple to a reporter, that he'd always looked up to Austin, even though they were the same age, 4 minutes apart. At the time, it sounded like a nice thing a grieving brother says. 20 minutes from Kukendall Stadium, There's a bedroom in the Metcalf family home that hasn't changed since April 2nd, 2025. The bed still made the way a 17-year-old leaves it before school. And that sentence, Hunter said, it means something different now. Before we go further, somewhere in all of this is also a 19-year-old who, by his own mother's words, is still just her firstborn, her baby. A kid whose entire life turned on 4 seconds under that tent. Now picture this. It's May, a year from now. Austin and Hunter walk across the same stage in the same gowns, 4 minutes apart, like always. Their mother's in the stands with her phone out, the way she's been for every milestone since the day they were born. Austin's name gets called first. It always does. Hunter's already turning to find him in the crowd, the way twins do, without even having to look. That day will never happen. The choice Austin made that morning, to sit with his team under that tent, with his brother beside him like every other day, the one that put Hunter close enough to be the last face he ever saw, may be the thing that finally brings justice for Austin Metcalf. Because Hunter's account of those seconds is now part of a record that could decide whether any of this gets argued again. I always looked up to him, Hunter said. He was a big brother even though we're the same age. He still is. He just doesn't get to prove it anymore. If this case isn't actually over, and it isn't, we'll be here when it moves again. That's what Casebreak Network does. Breaking cases. Following every lead, subscribe so you're not the last to know. There's a sentence for what Karmelo Anthony did. There's no sentence, none, for what it's like to be the twin who's left. I keep thinking about Hunter Metcalf, 17, testifying about watching his own twin die, and now waiting to find out if he might have to do it all again. If you were him, would you want this retried for a shot at more time, or would going through it all again be its own punishment? Curious where you land on this one.